Hello, welcome to this week's summary. This week we were looking at asylum seekers. Firstly, can I just say thank you very much for all your contributions on the presentations and in terms of the comments as well for 2B. Look, there was some great discussions, some really lively discussions. In terms of the presentations, I think by and large everyone did a really good job and put an effort into submissions. So I really appreciate that. You've been a hard-working group. And almost at the close now, we're going to be looking at a Collaborate next week for assessment number 3, but you'll find it launches out of assessment number 2 quite nicely, particularly if you're still using those topics. So I hope you do. I think one of my main pieces of advice is to work a lot more on that theoretical context. And for that, obviously go to the learning resources. And also week 2 is a really good week in terms of coming up with different sorts of theories and applying it to your case. So that's probably one of my main suggestions. And I did put comments under 2A presentations. So make sure you find your comments with your marks. It should be there just under feedback to the learner. Obviously, it's not a Turnitin assessment, so let me know if you have any problems finding that. But that's, what I'm really focusing on is how to get you up to assessment number 3 and what you need to work on. Now, one of the the asylum seeker discussions, I think there are at least 2 presentations on Labor and Liberal policy between asylum seekers. Can I just say with this kind of thing, try to go up a level and look at the overall the frame. Like, for example, if you're following a realist frame, you might be looking at the border security argument as the dominant frame. So even though there might be different policies between Liberal and Labor within that, one moment, and particularly, can I just say this is an ever-changing, very fast-changing field of policy. Asylum seekers, in fact, probably the fastest changing policy issue that we've had. It goes back and forth like a hot potato. So even though there might be small changes between the parties, look for the frame. Is it a security frame, a type of realist frame? More critical perspectives might look at a people-centered frame, which start to get down into people's stories and lives and what are they running from, and a more human-centered debate, which may be particularly absent from this one. A liberal frame might look at our obligations under the United Nations Refugee Convention, or even if we're not in favour of that, it might look at what we're doing with other regional parties to try and cooperate in terms of this issue. However, don't forget liberal frames tend to look at different freedoms and different human rights. Moving into constructivist frames, we might even look at language, things like the securitization of an issue. So, for example, should it be a humanitarian issue that that's actually been turned into a security issue. So these are some of the different types of frames. So when you're looking at Labor Liberal, you're saying, is it really at its core very different? So yes, you might explain some of the differences, but you might even conclude, actually, they're not so different at the end of the day, or yes, they are. But I think there need to be some stronger arguments on this, can I just say. So try and look a bit bigger picture, go back to the learning resources, which should help with that. Definitely for essay number 3, you want to be using your scholarly materials. So that's probably what I'd have to say. There was one debate in someone's presentation on asylum seekers which talked about spikes in numbers and what does that. So, you've got your push-pull factors. So on the one hand, there's policies which can impact numbers, obviously. But on the other hand, also look for, particularly where there are spikes, what's happening in the region at the time, in Afghanistan. And, often countries where asylum seekers are coming from at different times, it tends to go in trends. So you'll have boatloads one year from a particular country and destination because of what's happening politically in those regions. So that's just a little bit of a pointer that I wanted to add in. Again, thank you very much. We're coming close to the end, and I hope you enjoyed the presentations in this course, even though it's very busy in the first half. I think there's a nice break between now and assessment number 3, so it should give you a bit of time to think about it, and hopefully you'll feel well prepared. Get onto the Q&A on discussion board, and also come along to the Collaborate or listen to the recording. Thanks, everyone.